My name is Kaylee Parker, and at 28, I had already learned that youth in the corporate world was both a blessing and a curse. The blessing was energy, innovation, and fearlessness. The curse was that nobody took you seriously, especially not Richard Blackwood, my 55-year-old manager at Meridian Tech Solutions. What Richard didn't know, what nobody at the company knew, was that I owned 30% of the shares through a trust fund my late grandmother had established. I had been quietly observing, learning, and planning while everyone dismissed me as just another ambitious millennial trying to climb the corporate ladder. The morning Richard called me into his corner office, I knew something was brewing. His leather chair creaked as he leaned back, studying me with those cold, gray eyes that had intimidated countless employees over his 15-year tenure. "Kaylee," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, "I've been watching your performance, and while your technical skills are adequate, I have concerns about your leadership potential." I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, waiting for the blow I could sense coming. The Henderson Project is too important for someone your age to handle. I'm reassigning it to Marcus. Marcus Chen was Richard's golden boy, 35, Harvard MBA, and blessed with the kind of confident arrogance that Richard mistook for leadership material. The Henderson Project was a revolutionary AI integration system that I had conceptualized, developed, and pitched to the client myself. 6 months of late nights, weekend research sessions, and innovative problem-solving had gone into creating what would become the industry's next breakthrough. But apparently, my age made me unworthy of seeing my own vision through to completion. "I understand your concerns," I replied carefully, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "But I created this project from the ground up." Richard waved his hand dismissively, as if my contribution was merely a rough draft that needed a real professional to polish. "Ideas are easy, Kaylee. Execution requires maturity and experience. Marcus has been with Fortune 500 companies before. He knows how to handle high-stakes client relationships." The irony wasn't lost on me that Richard himself had never worked for a Fortune 500 company, but I bit my tongue. Instead, I watched as he handed over my meticulously organized project files to Marcus, who had been lurking by the door with barely concealed smugness. "Consider this a learning opportunity," Richard continued. "Maybe in 5 or 10 years, when you've proven yourself, we'll discuss bigger responsibilities." That afternoon, I sat in my cramped cubicle while Marcus paraded around the office, already taking credit for his innovative approach to the Henderson Project. My colleagues, most of whom were in their 30s and 40s, nodded approvingly as he explained concepts I had pioneered months earlier. Sarah Martinez from accounting stopped by my desk with sympathetic eyes. "Don't worry, honey," she said in a voice that made my skin crawl. "Your time will come. Richard knows what he's doing. Marcus has the experience to handle something this complex." I smiled politely and thanked her for the encouragement, all while mentally calculating how much her department would be affected when I eventually made my move. The next few weeks were a masterclass in professional humiliation. Richard began questioning my every decision, no matter how small. When I suggested updating our client presentation template, he dismissed it as trying too hard to impress. When I offered to attend the Henderson client meetings, he laughed and said they needed serious professionals, not eager interns. The fact that I had a master's degree in computer science from MIT and 3 years of industry experience seemed irrelevant. My age was the only credential that mattered in his narrow worldview. Meanwhile, Marcus was already making modifications to my project, most of which were either unnecessary complications or outright mistakes that would cost the company time and money. During our monthly team meeting, Richard made his bias crystal clear. "I want to talk about professional development," he announced, his gaze sweeping across the conference room. Some of you are ready for major client responsibilities, while others need more seasoning. His eyes landed on me when he said seasoning, as if I were a piece of meat that hadn't been properly prepared. Age brings wisdom, and in this industry, clients want to work with seasoned professionals who understand the complexities of enterprise-level solutions. Marcus nodded enthusiastically, while I maintained my poker face and took careful notes about who laughed along with Richard's thinly veiled ageism. The breaking point came 6 months later during the Henderson Project's final presentation. I watched from the back of the conference room as Marcus stumbled through my research, mispronouncing technical terms I had coined and fumbling explanations of algorithms I had developed. The clients, led by Henderson Industries CEO James Henderson himself, looked increasingly confused and unimpressed. When they started asking detailed questions about implementation strategies, Marcus began sweating visibly. He kept glancing back at me, silently pleading for help, but Richard had made it clear that I was only there to observe and learn. The presentation was a disaster, and I could see our biggest contract of the year slipping away. After the clients left with promises to review the proposal and get back to us, Richard was furious. But instead of acknowledging that Marcus had been unprepared, he somehow found a way to blame the situation on my presence in the room. "Your nervous energy was distracting," he told me privately. "Next time, junior staff won't be included in high-level presentations. You clearly don't understand the pressure these situations create for experienced professionals." I nodded respectfully and excused myself, then went straight to my car and called my family's lawyer. It was time to accelerate my timeline and make some long-overdue revelations about my true position at Meridian Tech Solutions. What Richard and the entire company didn't know was that my grandmother, Patricia Parker, had been one of the 3 founding investors of Meridian Tech Solutions 22 years ago. When she passed away 2 years before I joined the company, her shares had transferred to a family trust managed by my Uncle David, a prominent corporate attorney. The trust stipulated that I could claim my shares when I turned 25. But I had chosen to remain anonymous to gain authentic experience in the industry. I wanted to understand the company from the ground up, to see how it really operated without the protective bubble of being known as an owner. Now I had seen enough, and Richard's behavior had given me the perfect justification for what I was about to do. The company's annual board meeting was scheduled for the following Friday, and for the first time in 2 years, I planned to attend, not as Kaylee Parker, junior software developer, but as Kaylee Parker, 30% shareholder and newly appointed Chief Innovation Officer. My Uncle David had been preparing for this moment, quietly documenting Richard's management failures and Marcus's incompetence on the Henderson project. We had evidence of at least 6 other projects where Richard's ageist attitudes had cost the company talented young employees and innovative opportunities. The board was already questioning his leadership effectiveness, and my evidence would be the final nail in his professional coffin. I spent Thursday evening preparing my presentation, not just about Richard's failures, but about my vision for transforming Meridian Tech Solutions into an industry leader. I had been developing this strategy for months, identifying key areas where the company was falling behind younger, more agile competitors. My age, which Richard saw as a liability, was actually our greatest asset in understanding where the technology sector was heading. While he was trying to impress clients with outdated corporate formalities, companies led by 20 and 30-somethings were revolutionizing entire industries. I had the roadmap to take Meridian into that future, but first, I needed to clear out the dead weight that was holding us back. Friday morning arrived with perfect October weather, crisp and bright like the new beginning I was about to create. I dressed carefully in a navy blue blazer and pencil skirt, that struck the perfect balance between professional authority and youthful confidence. As I walked into the office building where I had been dismissed and underestimated for 2 years, I felt a surge of anticipation. Richard was already in the conference room, setting up his quarterly presentation, completely unaware that his career at Meridian was about to end. Marcus was there too, still basking in the glory of his Henderson project assignment, despite its obvious failures. Neither of them noticed when I walked past the conference room toward the elevator that would take me to the executive floor. The boardroom on the 15th floor was a place I had never seen as an employee, but I had attended several meetings there as a child when my grandmother brought me to work during school holidays. The mahogany table, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city hadn't changed much. But today, they would witness a transformation that would reshape the entire company. Board Chairman William Torres, my grandmother's old friend and business partner, greeted me warmly as I entered. "Kaylee," he said with a knowing smile, "are you ready to take your rightful place at this table?" I nodded, feeling the weight of 2 years of preparation settling into confident determination. As the other board members filed in, successful executives and investors who had watched Meridian grow from a startup to a major player in the tech industry, I reviewed my notes one final time. My presentation wasn't just about exposing Richard's failures. It was about demonstrating that I had earned my position through merit, not just inheritance. I had detailed plans for expanding our AI capabilities, partnerships with emerging tech companies, and innovative solutions that would put Meridian at the forefront of the next technological revolution. When Richard and his team were called up to present their quarterly results, I would be ready with alternatives that would make their outdated approaches look like relics from a bygone era. Richard entered the boardroom at exactly 9 o'clock, his usual punctuality marking what would be his final presentation as department head. He had brought Marcus, Sarah from accounting, and 2 other senior staff members who had consistently dismissed my contributions over the past 2 years. They arranged themselves around the far end of the conference table, clearly expecting to deliver their standard quarterly report to a familiar, supportive audience. Richard's confidence was evident as he opened his laptop and began connecting cables to the projection system. He had no idea that the young woman he had spent months belittling was sitting at the opposite end of the table as his equal and soon to be his superior. "Before we begin with departmental presentations," Chairman Torres announced, "I'd like to introduce a new member of our leadership team. Some of you may know Kaylee Parker from her work in our development department, but today she joins us in a different capacity." Richard's head snapped up from his laptop, confusion flickering across his face as he spotted me at the executive table. Miss Parker is Patricia Parker's granddaughter and inherits a 30% stake in Meridian Tech Solutions, along with a position on our executive leadership team. Effective immediately, she'll be serving as our Chief Innovation Officer. The silence in the room was deafening as Richard's face went from confusion to shock to dawning horror. Marcus dropped his coffee cup, sending brown liquid splashing across his presentation notes. Sarah's mouth fell open in an expression that might have been comical under different circumstances. But Richard's reaction was the most satisfying. His carefully constructed authority crumbled in real time as he realized that the young woman he had spent 2 years dismissing now outranked him in the company hierarchy. I don't understand," he stammered, looking frantically between me and the board members. "Kaylee is a junior developer. She doesn't have the experience for executive leadership." Chairman Torres smiled coldly. "Perhaps you'd like to reconsider that assessment after hearing her presentation about the Henderson project and departmental efficiency." I stood slowly, savoring the moment I had been planning for months. "Thank you, Mr. Torres. I'd like to begin by discussing the Henderson Industries project, which was originally conceived and developed by me before being reassigned due to concerns about my age and experience level. I activated the presentation system and watched Richard's face pale as my detailed project documentation filled the screen. Every algorithm, every innovation, every strategic decision was clearly attributed to my work, with timestamps proving that Marcus had contributed nothing but complications and errors. As you can see, the project's core innovations were developed between March and September of last year, well before Mr. Chen's involvement. The next 20 minutes were a systematic demolition of everything Richard had built his reputation on. I presented evidence of 6 major projects where his age bias had led to poor personnel decisions and missed opportunities. I showed financial projections demonstrating how much revenue the company had lost by sidelining younger developers with innovative ideas. Most damaging of all, I revealed recorded conversations where Richard had explicitly stated that clients preferred mature professionals over talented younger employees, despite having no evidence to support this assumption. The board members' faces grew increasingly stern as the scope of his discriminatory management practices became clear. When I finished my presentation, the room remained silent for several long moments. Finally, board member Margaret Kim spoke up. "Mr. Blackwood, would you like to respond to these allegations?" Richard stood shakily, his usual commanding presence completely deflated. My management decisions were based on what I believed was best for the company. Experience matters in client relationships. I almost felt sorry for him as he floundered, trying to justify 2 years of systematic discrimination. But then I remembered every dismissive comment, every condescending smile, every time he had made me feel small and insignificant despite my contributions to the company's success. Chairman Torres cleared his throat. "Mr. Blackwood, effective immediately, you're being relieved of your management position. HR will discuss your transition options separately." Richard's legs seemed to give out as he sank back into his chair, the reality of his situation finally hitting him. Marcus looked like he was about to be sick, probably realizing that his own position was now in serious jeopardy. Sarah had gone completely pale, no doubt remembering her patronizing comments about my need for seasoning and wondering how her own career prospects had just changed. The other senior staff members who had consistently supported Richard's ageist policies were shifting uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in studying their hands. "As for the Henderson project," I continued, my voice steady and professional despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, "I'll be personally overseeing its completion and presenting the corrected proposal to their executive team next week. I'm confident we can salvage the relationship and demonstrate what Meridian is truly capable of when we leverage all our talent, regardless of age." The board members nodded approvingly, clearly impressed by my detailed knowledge of both the technical aspects and client relationship management. Richard made one last desperate attempt to maintain some dignity. "The board should know that this seems like a personal vendetta rather than sound business judgment." The silence that followed Richard's accusation was ice cold. Chairman Torres leaned forward, his expression stern. "Mr. Blackwood, Miss Parker has presented documented evidence of management failures and discriminatory practices that have cost this company significant revenue and talent. Her personal investment in exposing these issues doesn't invalidate the evidence she's provided." Margaret Kim added, "Furthermore, her technical innovations and strategic insights demonstrate exactly the kind of forward-thinking leadership we need to remain competitive in this industry." I remained seated, letting the board members defend my position, while Richard realized that his attempts to discredit me were only making his situation worse. Over the following weeks, the transformation at Meridian Tech Solutions was remarkable. Richard was quietly transferred to a consulting role with significantly reduced responsibilities and no management authority. Marcus was demoted back to senior developer status and assigned to work under my direct supervision. A particularly satisfying turn of events given his previous arrogance. Sarah and the other senior staff members who had supported Richard's discriminatory practices found themselves attending mandatory sensitivity training and watching their own career advancement opportunities suddenly limited. Meanwhile, I threw myself into revolutionizing the company's approach to innovation and talent development. My first major victory came when I successfully renegotiated the Henderson Industries contract. James Henderson himself admitted that my original presentation had been far more impressive than Marcus's botched delivery, and he was eager to work with the project's actual creator. The contract, originally worth $2.3 million, expanded to $4.1 million as Henderson Industries requested additional services based on my innovative approaches. Local business journals picked up the story, praising Meridian's dynamic young leadership and highlighting how the company was breaking new ground in AI integration services. Richard's name was notably absent from all coverage, while my role as Chief Innovation Officer was prominently featured. Within 6 months, I had recruited a diverse team of brilliant young developers and experienced professionals who shared my vision for combining innovation with practical business solutions. The company's revenue increased by 37%, largely due to projects that leveraged cutting-edge technologies and creative problem-solving approaches. Richard's old-fashioned, conservative management style was replaced by a collaborative environment where ideas were judged on their merit rather than the age of their creators. Former colleagues who had dismissed me as an over-eager junior developer now sought my approval for their project proposals and strategic initiatives. The personal satisfaction of watching Richard's professional decline was enhanced by the knowledge that I had earned my position through demonstrated competence rather than just inheritance, while my family's financial investment had given me the opportunity to reveal the truth about his failures. My technical skills and business acumen had proven that I deserved the leadership role regardless of my background. The young employees Richard had overlooked and undervalued now had a champion in executive leadership, and the company's culture began shifting toward recognizing talent and innovation over arbitrary measures like age and traditional corporate experience. As I settled into my corner office, ironically, the same one where Richard had first dismissed my capabilities, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The walls were decorated with industry awards our team had won, partnership agreements with major tech companies, and photos from the company retreat where our newly diverse workforce had celebrated record-breaking quarterly results. My assistant knocked on the door to remind me about the upcoming board meeting where I would be presenting our expansion plans for the following year. At 28, I was now one of the youngest C-level executives in the city's tech sector, but more importantly, I had proven that age was irrelevant when it came to driving real innovation and business success. The Henderson Project, which had started this entire journey, became a case study that other companies in our industry began studying and attempting to replicate. Business Squeeze started inviting me to speak about innovative leadership and challenging traditional corporate hierarchies. Richard, meanwhile, had quietly left Meridian after his consulting contract expired, and I heard through industry connections that he was struggling to find another management position. Apparently, word had spread about his discriminatory practices and poor judgment, making him a liability that most companies weren't willing to risk. Marcus remained at Meridian, but had become a completely different person, respectful, hardworking, and apparently grateful to learn from someone he had once dismissed. The transformation extended beyond just my personal vindication. Meridian Tech Solutions became known throughout the industry as a company that valued innovation and talent over traditional corporate prejudices. Our recruitment efforts attracted top graduates from prestigious universities who specifically wanted to work for a company led by young, forward-thinking executives. Older employees who embraced our collaborative approach thrived in the new environment, while those who couldn't adapt to a merit-based culture gradually left for companies that still operated under outdated hierarchical systems. The company's stock price reflected these positive changes, rising 42% in the year following my appointment as Chief Innovation Officer. Looking back on that first confrontation in Richard's office, I realized that his dismissive attitude had actually been a gift in disguise. If he had recognized my potential and treated me fairly, I might have remained a talented but anonymous developer for years longer. His ageism had forced me to accelerate my timeline and claim my rightful position in the company leadership. The months of humiliation and professional disrespect had taught me valuable lessons about corporate dynamics and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who judge others by their contributions rather than their demographics. Richard's biggest mistake wasn't just underestimating me. It was revealing his own fundamental incompetence as a leader and manager. Today, 3 years later, Meridian Tech Solutions is recognized as one of the most innovative companies in our sector, with a corporate culture that attracts top talent from around the world. I've been featured on the covers of several business magazines as an example of how young leadership can drive dramatic organizational change. The Henderson Industries partnership expanded into a long-term strategic alliance that has generated over $15 million in revenue. Most satisfying of all, I receive regular emails from young professionals who tell me that my story inspired them to challenge ageist assumptions in their own workplaces and fight for the recognition they deserve based on their abilities rather than their birth certificates.